Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk about effort compliance. I'm Karen Watkins. I'm the director of effort compliance for Texas A&M, Galveston Health, Science, and System. And also with us today is Susan Compton. She is the effort compliance administrator. And as David had mentioned, our emails are here. If anyone has any questions or would like to do, personal review of their time and effort after this, we are happy to set up a time to meet with you one-on-one and go over anything. But if you have general questions, we would love to, at the end, definitely just put it in the chat, or at the end, we'll go over any questions that you may have. And to get started, we are currently in our certification period, and Susan's going to give a little bit of a overview of where we stand right now.
Good morning, everyone. As everybody knows, we're almost to the end now of our spring 2025 certification period. We've got 7 days left. We have really been working to get all of our numbers raised. We like to see at least 90%, 100% is ideal, and we do achieve that across the board with many of our departments and members. But we like to get over 90% for sure at the end of each certification period. Looks like right now across all members, we're sitting at 84%. We've got 7 days to go. Any of you guys out there that have certifications or are part of the system, please reach out to your certifiers. Make sure we get all of these wrapped up timely. We always have challenges in the spring because of our fiscal year-end closing procedures. So there was a PCT cutoff deadline last week on Friday. Sometimes that presents a little bit of a challenge, but we are tracking as we have in the past, and we will continue until we get 100% certification, and appreciate everybody's efforts to get us there.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, we're almost there. And as Susan said, we always, it's not realistic to say we'll have 100% certification, because we know in research administration, we always have situations that are not ideal, but getting over 90% is what we've always been able to achieve. And so I know we'll get there. We're close. Okay, well, today what we're going to do is I'm going to go through a overview of time and effort. We're going to go through the effort process. We're going to talk about roles and responsibilities, and I'm also going to go through and highlight some of our system features. So the federal guidance for time and effort is or uniform guidance. And then we also have a system policy. The system policy doesn't require that all members have their own time and effort SAP, but at Texas A&M, for Texas A&M Health and Galveston, we do have our own Texas A&M SAP that also governs time and effort. So each of these, and each member, again, if you don't have one specific for your member, then it defaults back to the TAMU system policy. Okay, so what is the minimum requirements? These are the minimum requirements that the federal government requires each university. If we accept federal funds, therefore, it is a requirement that we have a standards of documentation. Texas A&M has chosen, we have our own time and effort system. That's how we have chosen to document our effort reporting. So the minimum requirements are supported by a system of internal controls, be incorporated in the official records, which means the famous accounting system and Workday is where the time and effort data is pulled from. So those are the official systems, and then the data is pulled into the time and effort system. Reflect total activity. Each time and effort document is 100% of the employee's institutional base salary. It also incorporates all activities, not just sponsored research. That is one thing I do hear sometimes people say, well, why do I have departmental accounts on here? This is for my NSF project. It's because the federal government wants to see 100% of your Texas A&M effort. Encompass all activities, again, that goes back to what I was just talking about, in complying with accounting policies and practices and support distribution among activities or cost objectives. And that's why each account, whether we wouldn't just lump all sponsored projects into one line item. Each document, and we'll show that later, represents, if you have two projects, you're going to see both NSF, NIH, and then your departmental. Okay, so again, why is it required that we do effort reporting? Well, it is a compliance and to make sure that we are physically responsible and good stewards with these tax dollars. So again, when these proposals are submitted, the majority, probably about between 65 and 75% of all proposals, the majority of the funds is going to go towards salary, going to go towards payroll. So that is why effort reporting has always been scrutinized very heavily, because the majority of the funds is in this category. Again, they want to make sure that everything is accurate. The records must reflect actual work performed. That is why we do it after the fact. So in your proposal, that is what you estimate. That's how you're going to work based on the scope of work. But we do it after the fact to make sure that that's actually what happened. It also assures that it's reasonable, allowable, and allocable. Again, reasonable. It's an estimate. That's what you're putting in your proposal. It doesn't have to be precise. At Texas A&M, ours is 5%, plus or minus. Transparency, they want to see the document as well as the certification. It also meets those other requirements for the federal uniform guidance. It prevents from overcharges and unallowable costs, and just making sure that, you know, its integrity and safeguards research funding. Okay, so I want to give a little bit of history of how we got here. So back in 2003, the federal government decided, you know, I wonder if universities are doing effort compliance. So if you look here, and this is generally how any, you know, audits happen with the federal government. So they decided to do two. Back in 2003, they decided to audit two universities. Northwestern was one of them. Well, 50%, one of them, as you can see down here, Northwestern had findings and had to pay back $5.5 million because they were not in compliance. So when the federal government saw, okay, well, that could be an issue, let's expand and do a few more audits and see if this was just a one-off. So in 2004, they decided to do 7 audits. Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Washington, again, almost half of them all had major findings. And as you can see down here, Johns Hopkins paid back 2.6, Harvard 2.4. So they realized, okay, well, let's expand and increase the number of audits. So in 2005, they increased it to 13. And this included Dartmouth, Cornell, the Mayo Clinic, and UMass. This is really what got the attention of every university in the United States, basically. So this is, in my opinion, what really kicked off effort, you know, compliance for everyone. Because even here at Texas A&M, prior to our first, we have our homegrown system, but our system, we did our first certification in 2010, but we actually went back to 2009. So prior to 2009, we were doing what was called payroll certification, and we were doing it on paper. As big as we are, we were actually doing it on paper and having the PI sign off on it. So we did not get an automated system until 2009. But I can tell you what really it was this UMass, and I'm going to go into the through in this audit, but that is what really kicked it off for everyone. So you can see this happened in 2005, and then we got our system in 2009 because, as you can see, 2005, 13, and then the federal government increased it again the next year to 19. Between these 2 years, everyone got the message that the federal government was serious about this and realized that they had to put systems in place. But prior to this, I can tell you that most institutions were, if they were doing anything, they were doing mostly payroll certification and not effort reporting. So that's kind of gives you the history of how we got to where we are today. Now let's talk a little bit about this UMass. The UMass was the institution that was being audited, but Yale was a subcontract under the UMass. So the University of Massachusetts was being audited. Yale was a subcontract, and their subcontract was less than $200,000. So from that little small subcontract, when the federal government was auditing, they realized that Yale had issues. They found that a PI hadn't been charging the project regularly. All of a sudden, the project was going to end. He sends an email to his departmental administrator and says, "Oh, this project is ending. I need you to move my effort onto this project." Well, unfortunately, whenever it was being audited, they had to turn the emails over, and they had whited out the part about spending down the accounts. So again, this was all red flags for the federal government. And then they went in and audited Yale. And this was really what took the headlines in the newspapers because of them whiting out the email, and they were basically charging to sponsored projects, and they weren't even on campus. So it wasn't just a HHS audit. NIH, DOD, and NSF both all of them jumped in on this major audit, and the FBI even showed up at PI's destinations on vacations and at home, where they were charging to the grants and they were on vacation. So this really was the one that got the attention of everyone because it made the papers and everyone was talking about it due to the FBI showing up at the homes and on vacation. So this was the game changer. And then let's also talk about right here in the state of Texas. So Rice University, I guess our own Yale here in the state of Texas, these Ivy Leagues, I guess, or Rice just became an Ivy League. So you would think that we all got the message. We all are going to learn from these other institutions that had to pay back millions of dollars. Not Rice. Rice, in 2016, they had to pay back 3.7 million because they had graduate students that were charging 100% of their time to NSF projects. So they were charging 100% of their time to NSF projects. They were charging their tuition and then the indirect costs on their effort. And these graduate students were doing other things than working on these NSF projects. Well, this audit went back all the way to 2006. So they audited 2006 through 2018. And so they had to pay back 3.7 million. This one is really interesting because the University of North Texas. So you would think, and that's a lot, $13.1 million that they had to settle with the government on. Well, it would probably have been a lot more because they self-reported. They self-report, and usually the federal government will go easier on you when you self-report. So that 13.1 million probably would have been a lot worse. But this one again was very impactful because their when the federal government so what we charge in the accounting system should be reflected in the time and effort documents. Well, at UNT, that was not the case. And it's been questionable whether they had any time and effort reporting, but they ended up having to go back and pay 13 million, and their audit was from 2011 through 2016. Okay, so that's why time and effort, it's a big dollar amount because the majority of the funds on the proposals, again, are going to be payroll. That is why when the auditors come in, usually the first thing they're going to ask for, they want to make sure and see those effort certifications. Okay, so let's talk about the life cycle. When does effort really begin? Well, it really begins at the proposal stage when you're putting the effort on the budget. And then once the award comes in, congratulations, you've been funded. And then it goes to the payroll distribution, the costing allocation in Workday. So the departmental administrator, whatever the start date is on the project, they will establish and change your distribution in Workday to include the sponsored project. And then once that expenses and hits the account, then you've got an effort document that'll generate. Okay, the proposal. The things that we need to make sure that we talk about here are going to be PI eligibility. In order to be senior personnel, you have to make sure that you're in a title that is PI eligible, which is mostly going to be a faculty equivalent position here at Texas A&M. There are exceptions, but we take those on a case-by-case basis. But otherwise, it's tied to your job title. You need to make sure and budget based on the scope of work. We need to be consistent with how we're budgeting. So we can't, there's times where, and, not here, but at other places I've heard that, we need to make sure that, we're charging NSF 1 month based on a scope of work. If you have a similar scope of work for time-wise, we can't, this is a foundation, or they don't have this, it's only 25,000. So otherwise, that's not consistent. We need to consistently charge based on the scope of work and making sure that, these people, you're not volunteers. If you're a faculty member, your time is either being paid on the sponsored project or by the state of Texas. Okay, so that's really important. And also in regards to documentation. Now, this has come up recently. I was hesitant to put this in here because sometimes this gets very confusing, but I want to be really clear because I've seen a couple of things that have come up lately regarding supplemental pay where it needs to be very clear. So when the federal government put out uniform guidance, they changed the policy regarding supplemental pay. And I think it actually helped universities because it made it very clear you cannot pay supplemental pay. This is paying someone above their institutional base salary unless you have written approval by the federal agency. So it just removed any ambiguity there. So what I did was we have two earning codes in Workday for supplemental pay on sponsored research. And one of them is ESPR, which is extra service pay. This is going to be anything above 1%. And so that has to be included in the time and effort system. Anything that is less than 1%, which is what we consider to be de minimis, which again, we don't track or report anything less than 1%. We've linked that to what the federal government considers incidental activities. So if there is supplemental pay that was approved either in the proposal or submitted after the fact to the grants officer, and it does need to be prior approval. It's not after the fact. That is not included. So incidental activities is not included in the time and effort document. But I have seen recently there was a situation that had come up and a faculty member, it was very much a one-off situation. And really, we probably should have submitted and requested supplemental pay in that case. But then we've also had another case where they should not have received the supplemental pay. So these are generally one-off, and it should be very rare, but I've just noticed lately that this has been coming up, and we need to make sure that we have the proper approvals in place if we are going to pay supplemental pay. So the next is the award. And again, we need to make sure that whatever your role is in this process, that we're communicating with the faculty. Once that award comes in, we need to make sure that if you're in the department, that you're reaching out, letting that professor know that we've received this award, making sure that, this is what the budget is saying, this is the start date, and is that still aligned with how he anticipates he's going to spend his time? So communication is really key here. And then the next thing, this is going to be, so we go from proposal to award, and then this is when it actually is going to expense to the project. This is the costing allocation. And again, in this case, this person has one sponsored project now, and a portion of their time will be, of the 100%, will be devoted to the sponsored project. This is the effort document. So the next thing is, after it expenses to the project, then this effort document will be generated. So anytime during that 6-month certification period, a document will be generated that you can go out and view in the time and effort system. And it's in a collecting status. The goal is to make sure that these projects are being monitored regularly and not waiting till we get to the 6-month certification period and saying, oh, wait a minute, where is my NIH project? I should have been charging there for the past 6 months, or wanting to review something and have to do payroll corrections over 90 days. The goal is to monitor it regularly on a monthly basis so that we're not having to go back and do a bunch of payroll corrections. That has gotten better, but we still see during every certification period rejections due to, sometimes having to go back more than the 90 days, and we don't want to have to do that. But I want to go back, and I just realized I want to talk about making sure that we're charging sponsored projects when you're actually working on the sponsored project. If you budgeted 1 month of your time, 1 person month, to a sponsored project, then it could be that you spread that 1 month out over the 9 academic months. You might not have as high of a percentage. Then in the summer, maybe it does increase in the summertime. But if you're working on it all year, the whole budget year, then there should be effort towards that project. We don't want to just wait until summer, and because I still sometimes, not again, I'm just saying what I hear at other institutions, but people that are only charging their sponsored projects during the summer. If you are working on it throughout the year, you need to be charging when you're actually working on it, not just in the summer. And we definitely we want to avoid charging. If you're a faculty member, your position restriction includes teaching, research, and service. You'll probably serving on committees. So it is unrealistic to charge 100% to a sponsored project in any 1 month. I know that sometimes people will say that's the business practice. That is not our business practice here at Texas A&M. You need to be charging when you're actually working on the project, not just in the summertime. Okay, so at Texas A&M, we have elected, because effort reporting is considered an administrative burden, so we have elected to do it the minimal amount, which is twice a year. And so we have a spring certification and a fall certification period. We are currently in that spring period right now where we're certifying this past January through June. And again, what we mentioned earlier, it ends August 28th. Our certification periods are 45 days. It is important that we follow our own policies. So if we're audited, it is important that these documents are certified within the 45-day period. Otherwise, there's been institutions that they've just disallowed those certifications and made them pay back those funds. Roles and responsibilities. So again, it's important that everyone understands we all have a part in research administration, but knowing what your role and responsibility is and understanding that is so important. And here I've listed out for the time and effort departmental administrators what your daily, weekly, and monthly tasks are. The SRS project administrator, they do the project compliance. And then the actual certifier, which is either going to be, if you're PI eligible, you will self-certify your own documents, or if you are a manager of an employee that is working on a sponsored project, you may be required to certify theirs. But I won't go through all of these, but everyone, this is really important that everyone understands what their role is in the process. I was talking to a faculty member the other day, and they were concerned about, some of the data or anything. And, it's the faculty members' responsibility when they're certifying the time and effort is the effort correct? As the time and effort departmental administrators, they review the information before it's released to go out. They review the data against the accounting system. That is the role and responsibility of that time and effort departmental administrator. That is not the faculty's responsibility. So as administrators, again, we have our roles, but it is the responsibility of the certifier to certify the effort. It's not the departmental administrator to tell them, yeah, this is correct. It's correct. The information, the data is correct, but it's up to the PI to determine, is that how they actually worked? Okay. Okay, so again, we have a homegrown time and effort system, and it is an application within the SSO menu. So if you have access to time and effort, you will find that in your SSO menu. This is a time and effort document if you haven't seen one. Basically, I feel like our system I like things to be Google easy. So our system is very simple, but it's been resilient as far as we have not experienced some of the same audit issues that other institutions have. So it has worked well for us. But again, it shows here that this is the certification period. It also includes the FTE month. So this shows the 100% of the institutional base salary. And then again, what we talked about earlier, the breakdown to make sure that if it includes 100% and it reflects separately the sponsored projects and then the departmental situation. So, and then they can say, I certify, or they can disagree. Rejections. So it is important that if a faculty member is reviewing it, we do not want them to certify more than once. Any certifications more than once erodes the credibility of the certification. So we want to make sure that if they are reviewing the time and effort document and it's not accurate, we want them to reject it and then put a note explaining what needs to happen. It's important that they put a note in there, and it's also important that they reject it because that is how the system is designed to work so that the notifications are automatic. It automatically goes to the department. We get, as central administrators, we also receive the notifications, and then we can go in and we can act accordingly instead of not doing anything, leaving it out there in an open status, and then going and, oh, well, I'll, go talk to my department. No. Reject the document, it automatically sends the notifications. Okay, there's also weekly department admin reports. Anytime a department hasn't received 100% or achieved 100% certification, then they are going to receive weekly reports of open documents. And they go out and they manage and make sure that, okay, if there's a PCT that's routing, those documents are put on hold. Or if it is rejected, then they need to be having communications with the faculty member. But this is one of the system features as well. And again, we are trying, as big of a universities as we have, we need to make sure that everything is automated. This is additional notifications that this actually this actually got a little bit beefed up after an internal audit. They felt that we need to escalate this up higher because we were not. They wanted to make sure that it went all the way up to the CRO when we had out of compliance. Anybody that's out of compliance, it will go all the way up to the CRO. But this is the notifications during the certification period. It escalates prior to the 45 days to make sure that we have oversight and making sure that we're encouraging everyone to be in compliance. The out of compliance report, again, this is another report that will come out, and this is on day 46 after the 45-day period. And again, this one does go up to the chief research officers. Okay, and that is it.